At 2:17 in the morning, we got out of bed, walked downstairs, and started reviewing weapons. Let's talk about it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So, today we are going to be discussing or debating weapons. But before we get into that, you already know what time it is movie recommendation time. So, I feel like I should go first. You call that, Daniel?
Yeah, go for it.
Alright, so something which I've seen recently, which I think a lot of people should watch, is called Chief of War. It's starring Jason Momoa. It's pretty much about the indigenous people in the Hawaii Islands way back in the day, and like this war within pretty much their islands. And I think what's gonna happen also, it seems like I'm on episode 3, it seems like the colonizers are gonna make their way through. So it seems like a storyline which obviously war within war within their people, within their community, as well as um a soon to be coming threat from the colonizers, which they'll soon be colonized. Because at the end of episode 3, it's pretty much something where I was like, okay, yeah, definitely. I'm sure the colonizers are coming soon, because we already see, like, you will see the colonizers like episode 1 or maybe even 2, I believe, from what I can remember. But like, the threat isn't imminent. However, at the end of episode 3, you're like, okay, you see where it's going. So overall, I think it is a really, really good one. It's a really, really good one. You see a lot of butt cheeks though, which is is a bit strange. But it's not strange. Obviously, that's how they were living back in the day. So yeah, but that's just a warning. That's a warning. But besides that, it's a really good one. I would definitely recommend that. Apple, you're doing your thing.
So, like, but it's like the main story focuses on the internal politics of Hawaii, with kind of
I'd say
like
it's both.
the
I'd say it's definitely that's definitely one. I'd say like there's like two storylines, as in that's definitely one, and the other one is just pretty much is just to save them from the threat of colonization.
Okay, I see. Sounds interesting. So the best thing I saw this week was The Conference, which is a 1922 German movie, which dramatizes the Wannsee Conference, which was held in 1942 by high-ranking Nazis in order to plan the Holocaust. And it's a very pivotal event in the Second World War and in European history, but very little is known about it. There's essentially a couple of letters and kind of meeting notes. And they basically took the meeting notes and kind of turned it into a movie script and then shot it in the actual location where that conference was held, which was in this mansion by kind of this by the side of a lake near Potsdam in Germany. And it's a really riveting movie. It basically plays the attitudes of the time completely straight. It articulates what people believed and why they did the things they did and how they approached this mass killing of millions of people, but in a very kind of reserved and technical and dry way. So I would actually compare it with September 5 in some ways, because it kind of just depicts the time, and it kind of just presents different characters and their perspectives to the viewer, and kind of lets them kind of sort it out by themselves and kind of make sense of it by themselves. So there's no big speechifying, there's no dramatic music that tells you who you're supposed to hate. You're just getting a window into like Nazi ideology essentially, and how the German state worked in that time and how they went about planning like an atrocity like this. And there's been movies made about this before, and I've not seen the other ones, but this one is just just like this approach to historical movies, where it just shows you what people did and gives you a window into how they thought. And I think that is almost more important than what actually happened, although you need both, right? But if a movie can kind of get you to understand where these people were at the time, good or bad, right? That is kind of the job of a historical movie, in addition to whatever else is going on in it. And this movie really does that, so that's my recommendation.
Cool. Thank you very much. Well, excited it's time to get to the main event. Danny G, can you please give our audience a synopsis?
So, Weapons is a horror thriller movie in which at 2:17 a.m., what is it, 16 children who live in this town kind of get up out of bed, walk out the door, and are never seen again. And so the entire town is trying to find their children, and people are pointing fingers, and the kind of the town's kind of anger is kind of directed at the teacher, and the complication is that all the children, with the exception of one who were in her class, are the ones who disappeared. And so the story follows various people in this town who kind of try to deal with and investigate this mystery of where the children have gone. And it kind of slowly unravels this puzzle of what happened and why. And the kind of the plot kind of unfolds from there. So, what did we think of Weapons?
I'm gonna start off by saying I believe, surprisingly, that this film is in contention. I don't even think it's in contention. I do believe it will be top 5 films of 2025 for me. I had a surprisingly really a good experience with this one. I just loved the way that the story was told. It reminded me a bit of Pulp Fiction, not even a bit, kind of a lot. Just it wasn't linear, of course. It was like different storylines. And it was it wasn't in order. So I was like, okay, that just felt refreshing. Like it even felt like I was watching a horror in a way. It felt like I was watching a thriller with a pinch of horror. So I think if you're not really big on horror, you can definitely still take away something from this film. Like even like mystery, it's like I was just engaged in the mystery of it, and just like that, like I said, the way that it was told, I think that was the most effective way of engaging the audience and not getting us bored, because it's like, okay, I didn't expect it, number one, and number two, like it had a bit of everything. So yeah, like I said, it had a bit of everything. So I definitely enjoyed this one. I was surprised that I wasn't expecting it to be this good. If you want me to be honest, I was surprised. I was definitely surprised. But yeah.
So I think this is a really good movie. It's primarily a puzzle, right? And I would describe it as a 1,000-piece puzzle of a stick figure. So my overall impression of it is that this movie, like, I think it's really well shot, really well acted. Like, it's not exactly non-linear, but it kind of tells the story in kind of episodes that kind of overlap from the point of view of different characters. And kind of with each one, you get more pieces of the puzzle until it finally makes sense. But then the final story is not that involved. Like, this movie is kind of like, the one big thing I have about this movie is that it kind of builds itself up as this big mystery of what happened to
Mm,
the children, and why they left, and what's going on. And there's clearly something supernatural going on, because there's too much weirdness surrounding it, to just be a couple of children ran away, right? And then the actual solution or answer, which we'll get to in the spoiler section, is not that complicated. It's not bad. I liked it, and I liked how the movie ended, but it's not that complicated. And I'm not sure you needed to tell a 2-hour mystery story about it. It's kind of like one of my big favorite shows of all time is Supernatural, which is basically these two brothers who travel the country to kind of investigate weird things, and then they find demons and witches and all sorts of magical creatures. And this kind of played out like an episode of that show, but it took 2 hours. So if I had to have a big criticism of it, it's that it's probably much more complex than it needs to be. And even though I've read other opinions now, and I've read analysis and stuff like this, I'm still not convinced it needed to be this complicated. So
mm.
let's talk about it.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about the ending near the spoiler section, even though we are in the spoiler section, but it might be a bit too soon to go there. So let's start from the beginning. Um so the way that the film opened, saying this is a true story and then immediately undercuts it. What do you think the purpose of that was? And do you feel like it was an effective way to set the tone? Because for me personally, it did kind of set the tone, and it kind of got me, like I said, it did get me engaged. I think one of the strong points and positives I'll give about this film is definitely it will get you engaged from the get go. So when that did stop, so when the story did start off like that, I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. But then throughout the story, it's not I had an issue with it. I was just wondering. I was like, oh, okay, like was I was a bit confused. Is this actually so? This is not. Is it? This is not based on a true story, is it, Daniel?
No, this is just presented like the opening narration is basically one of the children from the town who says, "This is a story that happened in my town," but it's not really based on a true story.
Is that allowed in storytelling? Is that like a rule? Or is
I
that...
mean, it's like when a movie says based on a true story, it's not based on a true story, because it's almost always grossly exaggerated or just outright made up. So
Mm.
like I didn't feel, so I have a big chip on my shoulder about movies lying to me, right? Like if a movie kind of lures me in with something like when it says it's a true story but then it isn't, or it's about one thing but then it's really about another, I'm very quick to kind of get upset at the movie and kind of pout and say, no, movie, you lied to me. I won't forgive you, right? It's like I'm very much more quick to do that than most people, and I didn't feel misled here. Like this was clearly like a story people told, and then we see the story unfold. The only problem I have with the opening and the final narration is that they in the opening narration they say that the children ran away and were never seen again, which obviously makes for a good mystery, right? Like it gets your attention. Oh, like there must be something really profound going on. And then in the end, not only do we see the children being found, in the closing narration says something like, well, some of them like started talking again after a few years, but many of them never really recovered, and they kind of lived out in some kind of vegetated state or traumatized state,
Mm.
their lives with their parents. And that's an outright contradiction. That does not
Mm.
that should not make it past the first draft. And I've actually seen some rationalization about it where they say, well, they never really came home because they never talked again. They didn't have like fulfilled lives, but that's cheating. Like
Yeah, I was
that
gonna.
like that's outright a mistake.
Yeah, I was going to. I was gonna say like a rebuttal to what you were gonna say. I say maybe that's what they meant. However, I do see where you're coming from, and I do kind of agree because that is confusing, and it is like, okay, this just seems like, I wouldn't say it was a mistake, but I think they were just not too lazy to kind of fix it. But I think it would have been too much work for them to fix it because they already set the tone, like I said, to keep us all engaged with, oh, the kids were never found again. So then that kind of puts us on a path of that, okay, you know, now we're interested. Let's see how it pans out. And then I feel like you kind of forget, because for me, I kind of forgot that they said it with, obviously with everything that was happening. And I think that's kind of like not their cheat code, but thankfully for them that, the main half, like the main chunk, like act two, the main chunk of it was so interesting. And like I said, like it was just fun to watch and entertaining and thrilling. I think for a lot of people, they kind of, I would say they were more forgiving for that. I don't know what's called a mistake or just just too lazy to kind of like fix that part up. But yeah, I think they gave the film more grace for that little mishap because of how good the film was.
Yeah, it's a small detail, right? And after we watched the movie, kind of I watched it with some family, and they turned over to me afterwards and said, "Wait, didn't they say the children were never seen again?" And then I was not sure, and then I think I saw it before you did, right? And before Hervé did, and I sent you guys a message saying, "Can you pay attention to this just to make sure?" Because I wasn't sure, because they give you so much detail in the beginning that it wasn't clear whether that is what's actually going on. And now I'm a little bit confused because if it's a mistake, then it's a strange one to make, because
Mm.
clearly, like clearly you wrote that in the beginning because it sounds cool, right? It sounds ominous. But then once you write the ending, should you go back in a revision and say, well, okay, so let's change the saying, I don't know, like they weren't found for weeks or whatever, right? Or even don't say anything at all about being found again, right? Just say these children disappeared and then the entire town looked for them for a month.
Mm.
That's all you really need. So like it doesn't break the story. It's not awful, but it's more like why do this, right? It's just a strange thing, and then people kind of twist themselves into knots trying to justify it because they want the movie to work. And I think that part is just outright not uh not correct. All right. So one thing I guess we should talk a little bit about the mystery, right? So we've got like a couple of different perspectives, right? So we've got Julia, who is sorry, we have Justine, who's the teacher who is accused of having something to do with it, right? And she kind of descends into this cycle of self-pity and alcoholism, right? We've got
Yeah.
Archer, who's the father of one of the children who's gone away, who is who kind of goes out and investigate because he doesn't trust the police. We've got Paul, who is like a police officer who has like a past with Justine. We've got James, who is a homeless drug addict, and then we've got Alex, who is the only child who has not disappeared in his class, right? And
Mm.
those are all POV characters, and we kind of get overlapping stories. So, what did you think about that structure?
like I said, I thought it was definitely unusual. And like I said, it reminded me of Pulp Fiction. It was just like it was a fractured narrative, and the way that it just came back all into pieces was great. I think like I don't think this is common when it comes to the horror genre. That's why I said it kind of felt fresh because I don't think I've seen. Okay, well, Barbarian a bit. Well, this film is actually made by obviously the makers of Barbarian. They are the makers of Barbarian, so like you can definitely see that. For me personally, I think this is definitely an evolution from Barbarian. Even though Barbarian for me is maybe top 10 horror films of all time for me. This is definitely a step forward for Barbarian.
I,
But yeah,
I think this is definitely Barbarian 2.0. There's very similar ideas, and we can go into the themes of it in a minute. But yeah, it's this is I think this is very much as like it's not the same story, but it's like a similar. It goes to a similar well, but I think it does it better. And you know,
mm,
I don't hate Barbarian, right? I think I don't like it nearly as much as you do,
mm,
but you can see kind of similar ideas and storytelling styles. Kind of like Barbarian was the first attempt, and this is the second attempt, and I think the director of this has grown in between. I think he's a much better filmmaker with the second movie, which is good
mm,
news.
definitely. But yeah, sorry. Going back to obviously the characters, I think besides their performance, I think each of them definitely kind of elevated the themes within the film. Obviously the community paranoia, which was done so well, which was low key justified. It made sense because obviously the way that the film set it off was with obviously all kids. Because I don't know if I've even seen a similar storyline to that. But when I saw the story, and I said, "Oh, that's very interesting." Just like how all the kids disappeared from one teacher's classroom. So obviously, I was wondering before watching the film, I wonder how they're gonna tackle this. And the way that they tackled it with just the whole community, the way that they were going at her, it didn't feel exaggerated. So okay, maybe there were times it felt exaggerated. However, I think in general, I see that happening within a community. The way that they will react, especially towards the teacher. And obviously, you got other themes. You know what I'm saying, like what else? The idea of like the older generation weaponizing the younger ones for their own gain. And what else? Okay, and just the dark side of suburban life. So I definitely do think that was definitely executed well. I think yeah, I think I'm kind of speaking in general because I enjoyed all their performances. So I don't really there's a lot to say, but I just loved how it started with obviously it kind of gives you the clue as well with the boy, the one how because at first from the trailer. Wait, did in the trailer did they show that the boy was the only one left? As in, like there was only one person that didn't disappear.
I'm not sure. I don't think I watched the trailer for. Or like I did watch the trailer whenever it ran in front of other movies I was seeing in the last few months, but
Yeah.
I don't recall if they make a big deal out of it. I think they just say the children disappear.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think it was good how they kind of left that little boy as the only one that was in the classroom because it adds to the mission that oh I wonder what he's got to do with it because why is like it made me think to myself as well. It's like was like is he immune to whatever paranormal activities going on here or was he involved and you see the way that his story kind of ended up being told. It was like oh okay, so like he's low-key getting bullied by the classroom, which gets me more emotionally invested. I'm like okay, the kids kind of got it. I'm saying they kind of deserved it, but now I was wondering how could he kind of like how could he by himself disappear home classroom. And then obviously the parents were introduced. I was like, oh okay, so maybe the parents are, but then obviously you found out that the parents were even involved. They're victims as well. And I was like, okay, this is just getting more interesting, it's getting more messier. I love it. When I say messy, I mean in terms of like just it's getting crazy. Yeah, it's just yeah. In terms of oh yeah, so like I said, I feel like I could go on and on about each character, but I think overall it's just the way that like I said, it was fractured into many pieces, and the way that all their stories just came together, and it was very unexpected as well. There was people that kind of like killed off that I wasn't expecting. People's involvement in the film I wasn't really expecting. Like I wasn't expecting the dad, and I wasn't expecting the teacher to kind of link up in the way that they did, and I was expecting the police officer story to entwine with obviously. Well, I was kind of expecting it, but I didn't expect it to the way that it panned out for the what's it the addict and obviously the police officer, the way that their story entwined, and then it just panned out. It was just I think it was brilliant, man. I honestly think it was brilliant. What about you?
I've got some thoughts.
Oh wow.
So um so like this, but it's not all bad. Like I think it's a pretty even mix. So first of all, when the movie started, first of all, like it's pretty easy to write a compelling mystery, right? Like at least the beginnings of one. The resolution is actually much harder, and I'm pleased to report that I like the ending. Like when it's actually revealed what's going on, and the entire final confrontation where they go after the aunt and all of that. I think that's really great. But as I was watching it, I kind of went on a little bit of a roller coaster where I absolutely hated Justine, like every minute of it. Like she's just insufferable. And as we were in the first, like I didn't know the structure of it as I walked in, and as we started, like spend like 20 minutes or whatever it is with Justine, I was kind of dreading, oh no, do we have to, endure this awful person for 2 hours? And then I was kind of surprised, like pleasantly surprised when we go to the second one, to Archer, and I actually liked him a lot, mostly because I like smart characters who do stuff.
Mm.
And like on that level, he was the most sympathetic. Like he was not a perfect father or anything, right? But he was like the most interesting or the most enjoyable to be with kind
Mm.
of character. And after that, things started to unravel again, because I'm not sure all of the POVs are needed. I think to actually tell the story, you kind of need Justine, right? Because it's like she's the teacher, and she's accused, and she is kind of impacted by it the most directly, and of all the main characters, right? And then we've got Archer, who does a lot of the investigating, and then we have Alex, the kid, who is actually involved. Everybody else, I'm not convinced needs to be there, right? Specifically, that basically leaves Paul, the police officer, and James, the drug addict. I think you could cut them entirely, and the movie would still work. The basic plot of it definitely would work. You would have to shuffle some things around, like James makes some discoveries, right, as he breaks into the house and whatever, and that would have to be given to some other character, right? But I'm not entirely sure, either on a plot level or on a thematic level, they need to be there. And I have a feeling you see it differently.
Okay, I do. When you added the end about on the plot level and thematic level, I do see it and understand it. However, because I said the way that this story was told felt very unique in terms of the whole horror genre, I think they were necessary in terms of bringing the humor, because this was like a horror slash thriller slash comedy in a way. Like you could definitely feel the comedic tone to the film. So I think without them, it would have just been more so another barbarian, but just more mystery to it. And that, like I said, it felt very unique. Like, I don't know, it just felt that, even like you mentioned before, the way that it was shot, like different type of camera shots and different camera angles, and like it just felt different. It felt like A24 film mixed with I can't think of another production company, but it had like an A24 film mixed with, like I said, a barbarian. You know what I'm saying? A barbarian film. I think Barbarian was released by A24. I'm not too sure, but anyways, but yes, I think their characters was a necessity for me personally, because they definitely did bring the humor in such a thrilling experience.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about the humor, but it's mostly about, like, I think a lot of it comes down to what you think the themes of the movie are. So I think it has a very similar thematic space as Barbarian, right? So there's trust, image, and the idea of normalcy, right? So trust is basically about, like, who trusts who, right? Like, people should trust in the police, but they can't really. The police kind of doesn't do very much. Um, Children trust into their teacher, and then the parents trust into their teacher, and then they believe they've been betrayed by the teacher because she's done something to their children, right? And then we've got Alex, who is supposed to be protected by his parents, but they immediately fall under the thrall of the aunt, and the aunt is a relative too, so she should also protect Alex, but she doesn't, right? So there's this whole idea of trust, right? And
Mm.
then you've got image, which is all about what people assume about you, right? So we are like James, for instance, is clearly meant to be, and like, depending on where how you look at it, like a sympathetic because he's an underdog, or unsympathetic because he's a drug addict, right? And he breaks into Alex's house and all of that. But like, a lot of the story is about how people perceive somebody like James or Paul, right? Like
Yeah.
because Paul is supposed to be a police officer, somebody you can trust in, but then he's a drug addict, and all sorts, or he does all sorts of terrible stuff. Um, and the aunt, like Alex, kind of maintains like the illusion of normalcy, because he covers for his parents, and he kind of feeds them so they don't starve, and all of that. And then we've got normalcy, which is this whole idea of moving on, right? Like, so like Justine can't handle what's going on, and um Paul is kind of cheating on his wife with Justine, and kind of like there's this idea of kind of pretending that everything is normal when it isn't, right? And that it's reflected in the town as well, right? Who are kind of going, like, they're not exactly hiding it, um exactly, right? But they're in fact very open about it, but they're all kind of going on with their lives, right? So I think those are kind of the big themes here. And I think you mentioned something else earlier, that kind of was something else.
About
Like
their
like
necessity.
like theme in the movie.
Oh, in terms of the older generation taking advantage of the younger generation.
Yeah, so that definitely applies to the aunt, right? But who
Yeah.
else?
Okay, so I said dark side of the suburban life, community paranoia, and older generation weaponizing younger ones for their own gain. So those are me those three.
Yeah, so like, so I don't, so unless you've got a second example, I don't think it's a really a theme in the movie, right? Because like clearly Gladys does this,
Yeah.
but it's not like something that's kind of woven throughout the movie, right? Um, so
Well, you could.
yeah,
It depends on. I don't really think they mentioned the addict's age, but it felt like he was a teenager.
yeah,
And
he
obviously
was
the police
definitely
officer.
under 20, I would say.
Yeah, and then the police officer, you saw times where he's taking advantage of obviously him as well. Especially so also just kind of like to add to your point, they did kind of follow onto the theme, like they added onto the theme. Obviously, the point that you made about trust, right? The police officer's character and obviously Andy's interaction that kind of shows how obviously why number one the community can't trust the police, and also what happens when what happens when people from the community do trust the police. Because I'm saying you saw what happened to obviously Andy in the way that his character panned out when he ended up trusting Paul. Yeah, you obviously you saw what happened to him. You know what I'm saying he met his demise of what happened, and I'm talking about referring to near the end. Even though he was kind of like put in a situation where he had to cooperate, because he ended up stabbing him again with the needles. You know what I'm saying? It still showed. It still kind of like followed the theme about trusting the police and why they don't trust the police.
Yeah, so I think trust is definitely in there. I'm not sure that the police actually lets anybody down. They seem to be doing their job, but they're kind of met with like a crime that's not a normal crime, right? Like they go through all the usual steps, and they investigate all the leads, but they're not accounting for witchcraft, right? So
Mm.
and you can't blame them for it. So I'm not sure the police is really to blame here, right? Like Paul is just an awful person on his own, but
Yeah.
that's not really got anything to do with like the police being useless. Like they don't solve the case, right? But that's because they are not accounting for witchcraft, right? And like even when Paul goes to the house, he's immediately enchanted, right? And who is supposed to have a chance against that?
Mm. No, I do. I just think obviously because with what's going on, there was a scene between what's his name? Is it Paul? No, is Josh. It's a scene between Josh. No, sorry, Archer. Archer. Josh is his actual name. It's between Archer and the police officer, where obviously with obviously what's going on in the town. Obviously everyone's looking for answers. Obviously when the police can't produce the answers, um, the way that they would lash out is implying that they're not doing anything. So yeah, it's not in like intent. Of course they're not useless. However, because they don't have answers, the community that you see how the community reacts. So that's what I meant in terms of like losing trust in the police because they didn't have the answers.
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. Um, is it a problem if some of like if there's like a theme that kind of goes through the different viewpoints, but some of them don't really have much to do with the mystery itself? Because the reason we're showing up for this movie is to find out what happened to the children, right? And the beginning and the end are about it, and then in between you have other stuff going on, especially as having to do with Paul and James, and also Paul and his wife, right? What's her name? Donna, right? Where he cheats on her with Justine,
Mm,
and she has a very small role, right? Donna has, where it's basically like she comes across as a little bit annoying and overbearing in that phone call, and part of that is because we're seeing it through Paul's eyes, right? And then there's another scene where she confronts Justine, right? and that's more or less the extent of her role, right? So it's supposed to kind of illustrate this idea of kind of betrayal and betrayed trust and all of that. But at least for me, as I was watching it, I was a little bit disoriented because I was primed to follow the mystery and the investigation of the mystery. And there's a whole bunch in the middle that is not directly linked to it, right? It does, like, I think you're right, it does tie into it thematically, but it doesn't tie into the plot very, like, not directly. I don't think. And at least for me, that made the middle bit a little bit tedious because I was kind of expecting to get one thing and then I got another thing, and that thing wasn't exactly bad, but it wasn't what I was there for.
I see what you mean. For me personally, I don't see it as a problem because I feel like um influences matter. Now, those influences might not kind of directly relate to the plot. However, or have anything to do with the plot. However, those influences are important in terms of, like, a character's evolution and a character's storyline. So, like, if something happens, like for example, them two cheating on the wife, right? If that didn't happen, then we might have been seeing a more calmer Justine, for example, throughout the film, or more saner, just not saner, but more Justine that's more level headed. You know what I'm saying? Because I feel like cheating on having an affair with someone and then the wife catching you has a mental impact on you, which can kind of like impact your decision making throughout the film. So I think those are important for me because, like, when, even though it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the plot, it still has some sort of influence on the character and it builds to the character development.
Yeah, I can see that. It just seems like you could have had a similar effect by just tying it more directly into the kind of the main story. Especially since it's presented as a puzzle, right? Like, it looks like we are getting different pieces of this story that will all slot together, and
Mm,
then it will all make sense. And I think that doesn't work on two different levels. One is that a lot of the pieces don't, like we said, don't directly tie into the main story. It doesn't mean they're bad, but it does mean that they're not directly tying into the story. And then the second complaint I have about the puzzle is that I don't think there are clues. Like, there are a
mm,
whole bunch of details. Like, the movie make one thing I appreciated about the movie is that they go through extreme lengths to make all the details kind of line up, right? Like why the children leave, why they all leave at the same time, why these children, all of that stuff. Also the thing about the hair, right? Like, there's all sorts of, like, a lot, like a worse horror movie, I think, would have just put in some weirdness, and there's a little bit of this, right? Like, there's the dream, like, where Archer dreams about like this cloud that turns into an assault rifle. And the best explanation for that I've seen is that there's, like, he's sleeping in his son's, in Matthew's bed,
mm,
and there's a movie poster on the wall that has an assault rifle on it, so it's the last thing Archer would have seen. But
mm.
if it's part of a dream sequence, shouldn't that be, like, shouldn't that be a clue or something that tells you something about it? You know what I mean? Like, there's a
Yeah,
few things in here that seem just weird for being weird, and I think I include all of the dreams in this. But in terms of how the actual disappearance of the children plays out, I think it all checks out. Like, it all, like, that's really satisfying to see how that, like, how weird details get explained later, and it all fits, right? I think that's really good. What I don't like so much is that once you start seeing Alex's point of view, where we see what it's like being in that class when you're not the teacher. We see kind of how he relates to other people. How he relates to his parents, the appearance of the aunt, and like the slow take, or rather very quick takeover, and then how it gets increasingly weird as she kind of does her witchcraft in the house. And I'm not like as soon as that POV sequence started, it all kind of slotted into place, like, very quickly for me.
mm.
Whereas, okay, oh, that's what's going on, right? And but we had just spent 90 minutes with questions, and I don't feel like there are clues where you can figure it out before Alex's sequence starts, and then you get all the information all at once, and that feels a little bit like cheating to me.
You know what? I will agree with you with that one. I actually do agree with you because it did start to make sense once we started to see Alex's story. Even though I'm not mad at obviously all the stuff that I saw before, I do understand why for you and many other people, that would be an issue. So I do agree with you. I don't even have a rebuttal for that. I do agree with that because I didn't like, even with the assault rifle dream, I didn't understand that at all. I do understand people say, look, you usually dream about the last thing that you see. 100%, I do agree with that. However, I didn't understand, obviously with the context of what's going on, I didn't understand how that would have been a clue because. Wait, do you know how that's a clue? But even though that's just an example, that specific example, do you know what that meant?
I don't think it did. I think
Okay, yeah,
it's just weird.
yeah,
And like
yeah.
if like all the explanations I've seen are really reaching. But yeah, so but like this, but you would think it means something, right? You would think it's a clue. Maybe he's communing with whatever entity has stolen the children or whatever, or even just as like passively or whatever. But no, it's just weird.
Yeah,
And
but I did think Justine's dream made sense. I thought for me that was a clue that was okay. Like Alex, maybe she thought was well, there's something going on with like obviously Alex has something to do with the disappearance of the children. That for me, Justine's dream made sense. However, I think there was only I don't know how many dreams there were. I think there was only two or maybe three. But obviously the other guy's dream, I think Archer, his dream didn't make sense. But yeah, I do understand. I do agree with where you're coming from with that point. Yeah. Question. I don't know if you wait. Did you have a question?
no, I've made my point.
I was gonna say, the ending. Not the ending, but obviously the resolution in terms of why, how, and why the kids disappeared. Finding out that it was auntie and it was witchcraft. Do you feel like that was a cop out?
I actually really liked everything to do with the aunt. So I'm kind of a big fan of like folklore and kind of like one like I said earlier, one of my favorite shows is Supernatural, and that's a lot about like drawing from folklore and turning that into fantasy stories.
Mm,
And a bunch of them are about witches in various ways, right? That show was really good at kind of taking like folklore or kind of urban legends and then doing something interesting with them.
mm,
And but like the entire way like kind of the magic worked, like the person who wrote this clearly understood how like the law of similars works and the law of contagion works, and like which are like principles of how witchcraft works, right? So
mm,
like why you need like a piece of hair or belonging to that person, and you know how the stick works and all of that. That kind of felt like probably not authentic witchcraft, but it's like that's kind of how the law works, right? Like this is
mm,
not invented out of whole cloth. This is kind of using kind of established principles of how magic works.
mm. I see what you're saying. For me, like I think I didn't really see any other way it could have ended. However, I was still disappointed. So I'm not necessarily giving this as a critique. It's more of I wish they did it. Like they found a way to achieve a resolution where it didn't require witchcraft. But it does kind of like make you think it's witchcraft, but it doesn't end up with witchcraft. It actually ends up with you know, a an ending where it's not paranormal, pretty much, because obviously, I wouldn't say it was a cop out, but because like just it just felt like such a grounded and tense setup where it felt like there's actually a mastermind behind what the hell is going on, and I kind of wanted them to find a way to keep it like that. However, when I say mastermind, I mean just without the witchcraft, like there's just no paranormal stuff going on. However, like I said, the way that it just ended up, the way that this story ended up being told and unfolding, I was like, okay, they just it doesn't seem like there can be any other way by explaining what's going on without witchcraft, because what's going on, no man, like bro, no man can do this. You know what I'm saying? They kind of get, I'm saying, it's just impossible. It's impossible. Like I don't even see technology being, if it actually did end up with technology being responsible for this, I would have been pissed off. But yeah, I think it made sense for the way that it ended, but I just wish they found a way, which is just wishful thinking. I wish they found a way for it to not be witchcraft that was responsible for obviously the kids disappearing. But it made sense. Like that's the only way I could see it ending up. Yeah.
So I didn't see the witchcraft coming specifically, and that kind of ties into how there were no clues, right? I don't think
Mm,
the way the children leave is directly tied to witchcraft. It's not like somebody might say, "Oh yeah, that's a clear sign." Like there's kind of like a spell being cast somewhere or something. No, I don't think that's there. I did think there was something supernatural going on, and I don't know you can make the plot work without it. Like this is a very like just for instance, all the children leaving at the same time, like down to the
mm,
minute. Like that's
mm,
part of the mystery, right? And if that wasn't the case, then it would just be a couple of children walked out. but that's kind of what makes it weird, right? That's kind of what makes it a little bit heightened and a little bit more than just missing children. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No. I do. I agree. And obviously, and by the way, I wasn't implying from the get go. I thought it was witchcraft, or from the get go, the children disappearing had to mean that it was had to mean that it was witchcraft that was responsible for them. No. I meant obviously through, like, once the story started to be told and unfold. Obviously, that's when for me I was like, okay, yeah, it has to be witchcraft because it's impossible. I just don't see it being any other way that to make the kids disappearing justifiable. But yeah, in terms of what you said, yeah, no, I agree.
Like it could have been a demon or some other entity, right?
Mm.
Maybe
Didn't sound like the
somebody.
Pied Piper.
Yeah, like it has some similarities with the Pied Piper story. Yeah, so I don't think it had to be magic, but it could have been a different kind of magic.
Mm.
But I really liked how kind of like how it kind of all like it all like once you know what's going on, it all makes sense. And I think Gladys is properly creepy, and I'm a
Yeah.
little bit surprised because kind of witches have over the past 10 years or so have really become kind of underdog heroes,
Mm.
like standing up to like more powerful entities and whatever. And I'm a little bit surprised that somebody made a movie in which there's just a witch and she's just evil,
Mm.
you know. And but like the basic plot of it, like draining kind of the life essence from other people, i think it's I think there are some clues that she's been around for much more than one lifetime,
Mm.
because people see her kind of every couple of decades and she's always old. I think they say it's at one point. And kind of this idea that she kind of goes through the world looking for victims and kind of draining them of life energy, like one decade at a time. I think
Mm.
there's an implication there. um um I was also kind of like one of the big aha moments. Like I really like it when a movie makes me go, "Oh, that's cool." Where I
Mm.
say, "Oh, I did not see this coming, but it makes sense now," and that is that this is a zombie movie,
Ah.
right? Because but it's not like it's not the 28 days later virus zombies. It's not the
Eh,
Walking Dead slow zombies. This is voodoo. These are voodoo
yeah.
zombies because the voodoo folklore kind of starts with kind of people being kind of controlled by magic. I'm not even sure they're actually corpses. I think like voodoo zombies are actually not corpses as far as I know. And if there are any zombies listening, let us know in the comments if that is not the case. But my understanding is that it's kind of controlling people's minds, kind of turning them into puppets.
Mm.
Kind of that's kind of what a zombie is. And
Mm.
you kind of guide them with your magic to do things. I think either to protect somebody you care about, or to punish somebody you hate, or to turn somebody who is a threat to you into a tool, right? Like
Mm.
that is kind of what zombies are about. And they've kind of become divorced ever since probably Dawn of the Dead in the 60s, where they have turned into something completely different. And this is just voodoo, right? This is
Mm.
just zombies. And like when the parents go after Alex, that is a wonderful sequence when they try to burst through the doors and he's terrified because not
Mm.
only is somebody trying to kill him, it's his parents, and he's
Mm.
8, and
Mm.
like he cannot handle it. And in addition to that, they are very clearly possessed or like controlled by somebody else, right? So people have compared them to puppets without the outstretched arms, and I think that kind of signifies that they're being like somebody's pulling the strings, right? That somebody is controlling them from outside. And when I realized that these were zombies, but like the old school pre-Hollywood zombies, I said, "Oh yeah, that's actually kind of cool." Like
Mm.
I already liked the witchcraft. I already liked how creepy the magic is. Like I like magic that is really just evil, right? Like that is just messing with cosmic forces that you probably shouldn't, but people tend to have a reason. They have a reason to. But there's this kind of just did this. And I'm not even sure people have understood this, because I've not seen anybody else refer to this as a zombie movie. I've not seen anybody else make the connection to voodoo, and people seem to be fine with it being just a witch.
Mm.
So it's weird, and this movie is getting 100% close to, I think it's like high 90s now, but it's like everybody loves this, audiences love this, critics love this, and it's doing some things that are not that I didn't think would go over well.
Mm. Mm. I'll be honest with you, I did not realize that they gave off zombies until you just said it. I was like, oh, okay. That it fits the criteria of being a zombie in a way, but obviously it's triggered by voodoo. So yeah. That is definitely a good point. I think, to be fair, I feel like I'm part of the mask because I had no idea until you mentioned it.
Yeah, so it's like it skips like 60 years of movies and just says,
Mm,
"Hey, this zombie thing is kind of cool. Let's make a movie about that." And it just
mm,
completely ignores all zombie lore and just does it, which is kind of interesting.
yeah, that is
Um,
really cool. And
another
just
thing,
one
yeah,
quick point that I just wanted to add to the point that you made before in terms of like the aunt and how she was a great character and the parents. I think they were really great as well because they didn't overdo it with their characters. Like they didn't overdo the creepiness, for example. It felt very subtle and it felt like tension was rising. Like there wasn't a lot, for example, there wasn't a lot of jump scares with them. You just felt gradual progression with their characters. Even though they weren't saying much and doing much, they were in their own right scary and just like creepy in a way, especially like with the grandma, like her her stern, like what was scary about her is like it was her kind of like, especially with Alex, especially with her nephew, it was like her stern parenting just felt scary. Like you didn't know what was gonna happen next, so if she's gonna end up killing him or if she's just gonna, like, you just didn't know what was gonna happen with her character, but she was just very stern and it felt even more scary because you knew that she was a witch. So
if anything, it's weird that she doesn't control him, right? That she just lets
yeah.
him be. And there's no, I don't think there's any implication that it like the magic doesn't work on children or something, because it clearly
Mm,
does, right? It clearly works on
mm,
on all the other children. So if you're looking at from her perspective, and you're trying to tie up loose ends, and maybe you need somebody to go out and buy food and and talk to people and tell them the story, like the cover story or whatever. Maybe that's why. But isn't it kind of risky to have like an 8-year-old who clearly hates you, kind of like to be so dependent on that person?
mm,
It's weird. It's a
mm,
little bit weird. But
mm,
and also, like you said, it's not over the top. Like Gladys is very much over the top. Like I think I guess she would have kind of liked it better if, while she's in public, she looks like a sweet old lady and maybe a bit
you thought she was
eccentric,
over the
or
top?
like when she shows up to the school and explains how the parents can't talk right now, she's very creepy.
Oh, sorry. When I mean, okay, in terms of like aesthetically, yeah, she's over the top. I meant in terms of like she wasn't overdone in terms of the way that she was portrayed, her character, not her look, but just the way her performance, for example, and the yeah, just her performance and just her character just wasn't overdone with creepiness and jump scares and scariness.
Yeah,
It
like
was a gradual build.
there's no jump scares, but like when she walks into the principal's office and the assistant is just paralyzed with like, because she has to stare at Gladys because
Mm,
she's just that weird, and Marcus has to kind of shoo her out of the room because she's being rude. Like the second I saw her, like when I think that's the first time we really see her is when she walks in, when she walks into the principal's office. Like she was very clearly the bad guy, and unless there was some big twist coming, but like she was being set up as creepy and weird and kind of wrong.
mm,
So I don't know if that made the story better or not.
mm. You
uh
don't? Oh, I kind of think it does.
yeah, that just part of me thinks if she was, if her mask was just really nice and normal and innocent, like an innocent old lady, whatever, like really playing into people's expectations, it seems to me like it would have kind of like it would have been a strong effect. But we'll never know. Maybe it was the right call.
Mm,
Another thing I want to bring up is there's a lot of, I don't want to call it dumb, but it's like the kind of symbolism I don't like. So I've got a list here. So one of them is that, so we've talked about the dreams, right? Like I'm not sure the dreams contribute very much to the story, either for the puzzle or for characters. But there's other things in here too, right? Like there's this syringe, right, where um, Paul gets stabbed by James's syringes twice, and like he's terrified of having picked up some kind of this disease, and a big enough deal is made to kind of make it seem like it's important. And at first, like as I was watching it, I was thinking, okay, so a lot of magic is kind of like related to blood, right? And here you have somebody, you have diseased blood that is spreading disease, right?
mm,
Is that like the magic? I'm not sure. Then we've got parasites being discussed in class, right? It happens twice. Like,
mm,
um, Justine's class talks about parasites once, and then another. I think the when Alex is transferred to the other class, he also watches a class on some kind of parasite, right? And then somebody, and I think it's Archer, writes the word witch on Justine's car, and she drives around like with word witch painted on her car the entire movie.
mm.
Does any of this mean anything?
So the syringe one, I thought there was going to be more of an effect or just like a cause and effect, not cause and effect, but I thought there was going to be, I thought something more was going to happen with obviously that insertion, especially when he slept with what's her name, Justine. I thought maybe something would have spread it to her, but it was just kind of like, added to the whole. Well, it didn't really add to the whole ominous feeling of things because they had like it didn't result into anything. But I think they were just trying to add to the whole worry, because the film, that's one of the things that the film was good at, was just adding worry to potential worries and potential threats. So I think it was just a potential threat which ended up being a dud.
Yeah, it also ties into trust, right? Like Paul
Yeah.
asks James, "Is there anything in your pocket that might injure me?" He says no. He reaches into the pocket and he immediately pokes himself with the needles, right? So that's a version of trust. And then when Justine and Paul have their one night stand, I think that's after he was stabbed, right? So if
Yeah.
he is infected with something, he's now passed it on to her.
Mm.
And it just felt a little bit like, so this touches on the theme of trust, which is very broad, but does it mean very much? And then
Mm.
witch being written on Justine's car, like she's the person who's being falsely accused, and the real perpetrator is actually a witch, but she's being called a witch.
Mm.
And I'm sure, like, did you also think it was Archer who wrote it on her car,
Yeah.
right? Because of the red paint, right? Like that's clear,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So it was Archer, right?
I think so. Like it's said that he has a bucket of red paint on his car. He goes to Justine's house the next morning. There's the word witch written it, on her car in red paint. So
Yeah.
it's kind of clear to me. So there's just a whole bunch of symbolism here, which kind of is floating around the main story. And I
Mm.
feel like it would have been stronger if it had any ramifications in the story at all, right?
Mm.
Like if you know I like there's not enough time for like to Justine to find out that she's now got HIV, right, or something like that, and that for some reason has some impact on the plot. But like this being written on her car is kind of like it kind of ties into this whole rejection by the community thing. But from that point on, it's kind of just there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Yeah.
like there's a whole bunch of stuff here where it seems like you could cut it. And when I read like opinions about this, it feels a bit like it's all very like another symbolism here is maybe you can talk you can tell me this, but the children leave the houses at 217, and there's a Bible passage that refers to which is kind of the slaughter of the innocents. Does it ring a bell?
What? Where? When was that? Where
So
was
so
that?
like 217 refers to a Bible passage, and that
Yeah.
passage is like refers to an event called the slaughter of the innocents, which of course relates to the children being abducted, right, and being
Okay.
drained of their life, right? So it is a Bible reference.
Mm.
So what? Right? Doesn't mean anything, right? Like that's like I just look at this from a character standpoint, and it's
Yeah.
coincidence that it happens at 217, right? Because they just
Mm.
start the ritual at like 10 past 2, and it takes a couple of minutes, and then the children kind of like it takes effect at 217, right? Then the time itself is not special, but it's just notable that they all left at the exact same time down to the minute.
Mm.
That is why 217 is important. But it being a Bible reference, like it doesn't tie into Gladys's motive. It has no, like, nobody points this out, like this is not a very pious town, and so
Mm.
they kind of go on this wild goose chase or down some rabbit hole because it's a Bible reference or they see a Bible reference or something. You know what I mean? Like it
Mm.
just like I just really dislike this symbolism where it's just an author winking at the audience, but it
Mm.
doesn't touch on plot or character. And
Mm.
there's a couple of things like this in the movie, right? Like, and the 217 thing is one of those. I can't even tell you which Bible verse exactly because I just saw a reference to it in some comments. But it's like very like this is something that would be on a writer's mind, and
Mm.
everybody involved would feel very smart for noticing it. And it's like what's this got to do with the story?
But then you think it kind of adds to the whole, spirituality of things of it, especially when it comes to giving clues. Because obviously, if we're seeing 217, that's like, okay, well, then it looks like we need to go beyond the human understanding and realize that this situation is supernatural,
Yeah, I would buy
paranormal.
that if it tied into like what anything and like anything any character did.
Mm.
If it's just purely there because somebody like recognizes it and can write like a I don't know, like a Collider article or whatever those websites are about the hidden symbolism in weapons, It's like I roll my eyes at that stuff, like weave it into the story and make it matter to the characters.
mm,
um and maybe, some people in the town are really religious and others aren't, and so it's significant to some of them and not to others. There's ways in which you could make this important, but simply it being symbolic, I don't think adds anything to the story. I just want to rant about that because, like, I just find that annoying, especially
mm,
when, like, that title brings me to another question, like, where when you so on Rotten Tomatoes, this is very close to 100%. It started off at 100%. Last time I checked was like 96%, and audience score is also that high, right? So this should be the best movie ever made, right? According to that metric. And but when you look at kind of like good and like positive and negative reviews, it's very polarized. Like, people either really love this or they really hate this. And the people who love it, it seems to me like they want to really like it, and they kind of excuse some of the kind of the plot issues, or like empty like symbolism, like the stuff we talked about. Like, I don't think any of the stuff we talked about is really bad for the movie. It's just I wish it wasn't there, and if it wasn't and was replaced by something else, I think it would be a little bit better. But
mm,
it doesn't harm the movie, right? This is one of the few I've seen this year that I actually want to rewatch. Um,
mm,
but like the people who like this make it seem like this is a masterpiece, this is flawless. Anybody who doesn't get it is just a philistine, right? It's just some kind of uncultured swine, right? And then the people who don't like it say, "Oh, this is just complete trash, incoherent, pretentious nonsense." Like, they think this movie is like what I think The Monkey is, like completely empty, self-congratulatory, nothing. That is just self-important and doesn't say anything.
mm,
Like a large chunk, like 30% or something of Google reviews say that's what this movie is, and that's not that either. It's like a really well crafted story, like with a lot of moving pieces, a lot of detail, and it all kind of slots together. And I wish there was a little bit less empty, like floating theme, and a little bit more focus on the mystery itself. And but that's taste, right? I'm not gonna say, like, none of this kind of brings me to a point where I say this is just a trash movie, because it
mm,
just isn't.
mm. I feel like it's had a similar reaction to Barbarian as well. I don't know what it is, but if it feels like obviously the makers of this film just create such a divided opinion, and I don't know if I think it might have to do something with the style of the film, in terms of not the way that it's shot, but just the whole like mystery mixed with like it's just unconventional horror is what I'm trying to say. Like unconventional horror is like Marmite, either you like it or you don't, and I think that's the type of thing, like type of films that they're going to create. Because yeah, I think this I don't know if I think this might be their second project,
I think so,
but yeah,
yeah.
I'm not too yeah. So it feels like that's like with the I hope they're going to create more projects like this. But I think with this with this type of like I said, this type of genre that they've created for themselves, it feels like that's the we're gonna have similar opinions because obviously their horror is just so unconventional. So either people like or you don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It certainly doesn't quite, it's not quite standard, right? Like, it's not
Mm,
quite exactly what you would get out of a Blumhouse movie, or the latest Insidious or something. It's a little bit different, right? And
mm.
I don't like, I'm really hesitant to just say, okay, people who don't like it just don't get it. But
But
a
I
lot
think they
of,
don't like. I think they don't like it is because like it's similar to Night Swim, right? Where it wasn't really like a horror film, and like pretty much what you're looking for in a horror film is not you is what you're not going to get from that film, like Night Swim or Barbarian or this film, for example, because a lot of people are just expecting jump scares, etc., etc. They're not expecting like a whole mystery film within a horror or a whole thriller film. Well, not thriller, but that's a terrible example. But like a whole romance storyline within a horror. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like I think they didn't get what they expected or what they were expecting to get or what they were coming for, and I think that's where the disconnect comes from. Whereas other people, they're a bit more, I wouldn't say open because that would kind of imply like the people that don't like it aren't open, but they, they just kind of like, kind of open to change in a way. And that change works for a lot of people, but it doesn't work for some. But I think that's kind of for me, I think that's where the divide comes as well.
yeah, I'm not sure. Like, just looking at some of the criticisms, some of them I could agree with, and some of them were just you weren't paying attention. So, for example, like a recurring complaint I've seen is that it doesn't make sense what Gladys wants with the children, when I thought it was very clear that she's draining people of like their life essence. She wanted to do it to the parents, and it wasn't enough, so she needs more victims. And then Alex says, "Hey, I know a bunch of children who presumably have a lot of life essence, being very young." But then, and he has a reason to want to sacrifice them so that maybe somebody he cares about doesn't get sacrificed. It like I thought especially like the dynamic between Gladys and Alex, I think, was very clear and very good. And I kind of knew, like, once we were in the final segment, I had a very clear idea of why people were doing stuff, and Gladys's motivations I thought were very clear as well. So there are some criticisms here where that I keep seeing, where I say, no, look, listen, this is a movie where you do have to pay attention, and that doesn't mean you have to be smart to understand the movie, or if you like this movie, that means you're smart. But it's like there's a lot of detail here, and the details for the most part matter.
Mm.
And I would just, if the plot didn't make sense to you, I would recommend watching it again, because then, and paying it, and if you pay attention to the details, it will probably make sense, because I think the pieces do in fact fit together.
Mm. Yeah. Mm. Well, also, so I just wanted to kind of quickly go back to the point that you made in terms of, like, you know symbolism and stuff like that. How is a bit, you kind of find it annoying and stuff. But doesn't that kind of like isn't that like a foreboding I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but foreboding tactic?
um like my thing is just, I want it to matter for the characters, right? I want the symbolism to say something about the characters, or tie into character motivations or their thought process or something like
Okay.
that, right?
Okay, I get that.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm not against symbolism. It's just, if you're just making a list of things that reference trust, for example, and you come up with like 15 things, and you say, look, this movie's about trust. It's like, like, if it's about trust, that should be reflected in character actions, for example, and it is, and in the case of this movie, it is, right? But there's like things where they, that's kind of, I think, where it comes down to whether or not you think Paul's story is important, right? For example, where it's
Mm.
not like, some of the stuff is not directly linked to the story, but it does have to do with the themes of the story, and then it's a matter of taste whether or not that belongs there. And I'm just in the camp that says, make it matter to character actions and decisions, and have it be reflected in them, and that's more compelling, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think it's time to go to last thoughts and ratings. For me, I'm going to rate this one I think I might have to give it 8. I might push it to 8.5. Let me just say 8.5, but over time it might go down to 8. I'm not sure, but I think for now I'm going to stick it to 8.5. Yeah, 8.5 out of 10. This one, I'm a big fan. I'm gonna find out, do some research who these makers are, but I'm a big fan of the way that these guys or girls, I'm not, like I said, I'm not too familiar with the makers, the creators of this film, but I'm just a big fan of the way that these guys tell story, or girls. I just had a great experience with this one. It's got a bit of everything. Felt like watching a whole mystery film within a horror. I'm saying, with a package as a horror, and it was horror slash and thriller. It was just everything. You get everything from this film. Yes, like after obviously speaking with Daniel, there are issues with the film, which I'm now kind of like, now realizing. But I think because the way that the film was told, it kind of makes you, it kind of gives you like, you kind of give grace to the film, and sometimes you kind of like, you don't even realize. But I'm not mad at that. I'm not mad that I didn't realize, obviously, the errors that they made, because, like I said, the way that the film was told, it was. I don't want to use the word superb, but I just had a great time. Man. It was a great storytelling. I don't really have much to say because I've said everything that I have to say. Got big praises for this film. Thank you very much. Whoever you made this film, please keep creating more for us, for me, but in particular. But yeah, thank you. 8.5.
So the funny thing is, the creator of this is Zach Cregger, who I know from Whitest Kids You Know, which is a sketch comedy group that did a bunch of sketches 20 years ago. So this guy has a background in sketch comedy. So,
Okay.
and there's like, it's been a while since I watched some of the stuff, but there's some really funny stuff in there. And I actually do think, like, sketch comedy especially means you have to kind of convey an idea very effectively, and you have to be very clear about what it is you're trying to say. Like, you can't flail around for 2 hours in a sketch comedy, right? So
Mm,
I think that is kind of something where kind of these different segments come from, and that is why both um, Barbarian and this kind of come in segments, that kind of
mm,
triangulate the same story. I think that's kind of where that comes from. And I think it's just good. It's like he's just a good storyteller. I just wish
mm,
he was a little bit more disciplined, and like the details kind of hung together a little bit more,
Mm.
and he was more into kind of killing his darlings, right? Where it feels a bit like he's putting stuff in because he thinks it's cool, and he's right most of the time. But afterwards, some of those things should probably be cut to make a leaner and more efficient and more targeted story. And that is just my taste, right? I think that's what I like in a story. And like, this guy's just different, right? Like, he just has a different taste. He likes the detail, he likes the tangents, he likes the detours, and that's just a difference of opinion. But the movie itself is really well made. Like, one thing we didn't go into is how this thing is shot. There's several scenes where there's like somebody coming up to a character in the background. Like one of my favorite shots in this is when Justine is in the liquor store, and she kind of goes through the aisle and she turns corners, and we see Donna come after her, right?
Yeah.
And with every turn, she gets closer, and then we kind of finally have the confrontation. And I just like that way of shooting something, where something is coming to where we see something is coming towards a character and they don't see it, and that is kind of a source of suspense, because
Mm.
at that point we don't know who Donna is and why she's going after her. She might be another zombie, for all we know at that point. But like, the point is, like, we know something is going to happen and we don't know, right? And
Mm.
that trick is being repeated a few times in the movie, and it's just nice, right? It's just, we're so used to kind of work for hire directors, right, who just shoot the script, if there's a script at all, and they kind of just do what's necessary, but they don't do interesting things with the image. And you can get very artsy with this, and I like things grounded. But here, it's used in a very grounded way, right, where it's just about perspective and what a character knows and sees and what we know, right? So,
Mm.
like, like on a filmmaking level, I think it's just really good.
Mm.
I just wish the script was a little bit more disciplined. I really I think the mystery is not nearly as involved as the movie pretends it is, and like, this could have been like a 42-minute like episode of a show, like of a TV show, right? Like, in terms of the plot itself, right? It
Mm.
did not have to be 2 hours. And then, given that it is, I have to ask why, and it was a good idea, and and so on, right? But just as a movie, this is definitely going to be in my top 10 for the year. Like, a lot has to happen for that not to be the case. Might not make it the top three, but it's definitely up there. So that's like a 5.6.5 out of me. It's just, I'm glad I watched it. It's like a well-made movie, and most of my problems with it are down to taste.
Mm. Wow. Well, guys, thank you very much for tuning into today's discussion. Sorry it didn't turn into a debate, but yeah. Daniel, please, you already know I'm not good at this part, but you please, do Hervé's little outro.
So if you've made it this far, please tell a friend. And if you hate what we do, please tell an enemy.
All right, guys, you heard it here first. We are the Eye of the Storm podcast. Thank you very much, and we will see you next week. Au revoir.
Bye bye.